Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Please do me a favour and let me know in the comments that you can hear me. I'm going to assume that you can and give you a bit of context about what you're going to hear this evening. 5 years ago tonight, Ben Stiles and I, Ben Stiles is a musician, a violinist, fiddle player, stood in St John's Church, Leeds, and we performed A Ghost Story as the Book of Darkness and Light for the very first time. And that evening the church was full, and we told that story several times over the evening, and I think something in the region of 1,600 people came to see us, and it was really fun, and the rest to a certain extent is history. And what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to read to you that very first story, and it is a reading, by the way. That's my little caveat to ask you to be kind. Couple of things. I've got a slightly different setup this evening. I'm really hoping it works out. I'm using a completely different camera, and the lighting's different, as you can see. So I'm trying this out, really. I hope I might use this on Halloween as well, if anybody is coming to that. If there's huge amounts of lagging with the camera and the sound, please let me know in the comments, and I'll pause, and we'll go back to a way worse light setup. If I have to change to my usual camera, it's really going to look it's not going to look great, basically. So apologies for this admin at the top, but please let me know, be really clear with me in the comments if something goes wrong. Otherwise, do me a favor and maybe keep the comments clear just for this, just because if I see something I might panic, but you know, I'm not going to be too strict about it or anything. So I haven't performed or read this story for about 5 years. Not over 5 years, just under 5 years. So it's really interesting to go back to it. I need you to imagine a couple of things. I need you to imagine first and foremost that Ben is by my side, playing the violin. That's really important. And I'm wearing a very similar costume to the costume that I wore on the night. There's a reason, and I hope that will become clear. And so you need to imagine that you are in St John's Church in Leeds, in the centre of Leeds. It's a 17th century church, and it has carved wooden pews and this golden altar and this enormous pipe organ at the back left. And this is where we stood at the front of that church to perform this story, and it was written specifically for this night and for this church. So it does refer to the church quite specifically. The rest, of course, is an invention. So you have to imagine that you're with me in that church, and I'm going to read it as if, to a certain extent, I'm going to read it as if we're there together in that 17th century church 5 years ago on Light Night in Leeds. Okay, so without further ado then, I'm just going to move my mic. Let's get going. This book, so the legend goes, was discovered during an excavation in the south of the city of Leeds many years ago. It contains within its pages stories and sketches and letters and confessions, tales of both darkness and light. How the book came to be in my possession is a tale for another night. There is a story in this book that I'm always drawn to. It's a tale of an encounter in this very church. You see 4 spirits are said to haunt this place. I'm sure we'll be safe so long as we're all together. This account by one Arthur Clayton of Hunslet begins, as so many of the best stories do, in a public house, the Turk's Head off Briggate. The story begins with this line. After taking a long swallow of his ale, Jack Waterhouse lifted his head and, with an expression of immeasurable horror, said to me, "Sir, tonight I have seen the devil." Not 10 minutes before this, Jack had ambled in to the Turk's Head Inn, no more noisily than a scolded child entering a nursery, yet each man there raised his head. It was as though something had followed Jack in, something altogether unpleasant. Jack was a lawyer's clerk and a passing acquaintance of mine. I had seen him in the Turk's Head many an evening over the past few years. He was engaged to be married to one Miss Isabel Hope, one of the kindest, most beautiful women in the county, not to mention her intelligence, generosity, and good grace. Since their engagement, young Mr. Waterhouse had earned himself the nickname Smiling Jack, though that moniker seemed wrong on this night. After his singular entrance, I had guided Jack to my table, got him seated, and ordered him a tankard of beer. Though just 21 years of age, Jack's complexion that evening was ashen, and he looked older, more weary than a man of his years ever ought. He stared dead ahead, as if trying to locate something or someone long since departed. He jumped and flinched from time to time, as though fearing an attack from some unseen hand. After several more ales and tots of gin, Smiling Jack slumped back into his chair, calmer now and settled enough, I thought, to tell his tale, whatever it may be. "I have seen the devil, sir. I have seen him. I have seen him. I have seen him." Earlier that same evening, Jack had met with the new vicar of the parish of St. John, one Reverend Michael Small. They were meeting, of course, to discuss Jack and Isabel's forthcoming nuptials. "The decor of the place is breathtaking," Jack said, his eyes widening as if taking in the stained glass and the angel statues and the shimmering gilt of the altar anew. "The new reverend spoke in joyous terms of the coming day. Do you know, ours is the first wedding to take place in St. John's for over 50 years. At this, a commotion arose to our left. At an adjacent table sat an ancient drunk by the name of Havelock. He looked as though he might speak, but then did not. I do not care for the man. A grubby scoundrel who always reeks of soured ale, as a troubling individual. As if to vindicate my opinion, the brute had upended an entire tankard and was proceeding to use his own ragged overcoat to soak up the liquid. I turned back to my young companion and implored Jack to continue. The meeting at St. John's Church, Jack recounted, went well. After some while, and making his apologies, Reverend Small left for another appointment. Jack had asked if he might stay in the church a while. He promised to call on the verger who lived nearby to lock up when he was finished. "By all means," the vicar had said. "Anywhere but the altar, of course." Jack had wandered about the church, taking in all of its holy beauties, marvelling at the craftsmanship and the care and the rapturous splendour of the adornments. Soon, Jack was drawn towards the sanctified altar. "I knew I oughtn't," he said, "but I wanted to stand there and imagine what it might be like to be beside my Isabel when we became united in front of God." The last of the evening light was just fading, but Jack described the dimly lit church as a thing of pure magnificence. I closed my eyes to enjoy the moment. I was conscious then of a strange aroma, that of strong-smelling flowers. It surrounded me for only the briefest of moments and then, alas, faded away. But then the most unnerving thing occurred. With my eyes still closed, I heard a sound over my shoulder. A most dreadful sound, a sort of wheezing, as if someone was struggling for air. I was aware, then, that a presence was approaching me from behind. I'm ashamed to say that I froze in fear. Whatever the figure was, it was now right behind me. I could feel it breathing on my neck. Somehow I found the courage to look behind me. I turned slowly to see who or what was standing there. Nothing. I felt like a fool. I collected my hat from where I'd left it on the pew and made to leave. But then there, in the aisle, oh God, I can see it now. Jack told me that what he saw was an enormous figure slouching down the aisle, dragging itself towards the altar. Flooded with terror and fearing for his life and his very soul, Jack turned and fled. He ran to the nearest door that he could find, one tucked away at the very back of the church. Jack found himself in a long, cold corridor, a leaky hallway decked somewhat strangely in deepest red. Something about the light in there gave the impression that the corridor was in fact a single room, repeated, one might say mirrored over and over. Every few yards a single almost spent candle flickered, casting a motley patchwork of yellow light next to pitch blackness. Seeing the lit candles, Jack thanked the heavens. The verger, he must have come to do some nightly duties. Jack wasn't alone. The relief was overwhelming. Indeed, he began to imagine that his encounter moments before was a mere figment of his tired, overworked mind, combined with a trick of the dusk light. Still keen on finding company, he proceeded down the red corridor. As he walked, he noted that the floor beneath him was cracked and scraped and covered in straw, stained too with something dark which felt sticky underfoot. And there was a distinct smell of rot and of something burnt or yet still burning. Strewn about the floor were odd-looking items, tools for metalwork perhaps. Chisels and files and pliers and nails. After what felt like an age of walking, Jack began to fear that he'd been turned around somehow, for he seemed to be making no ground. He stopped and decided to go back the way he came. At the end of the corridor stood the great hulking figure, Though petrified, Jack was transfixed by the thing's curious movements. It seemed to be rocking gently, groping its way along the wall. Jack noticed that its sight seemed to be impaired in some way. It hadn't seen him, but it was moving slowly forwards. Jack tucked himself against one of the parts of the wall which lay in shadow and waited. Before long, the great figure was only feet away, and Jack saw for the first time its face. A man, and yet not a man. It seemed to be smiling, revealing rotten stumps of teeth. There was an odour like stale tobacco and something much more foul, something fetid, something of the crypt. To his horror, Jack saw that the candles, now down to the root of their wicks, had begun to blink out, one at a time. Before long, the corridor was in absolute darkness. After a moment to steel himself, Jack seized his opportunity. He bolted blindly down the corridor, colliding with the figure as he did so. It let out the most ungodly scream and began to pursue him at speed. Jack sensed that it was always gaining on him, grabbing for him with its horrid arms. He knew he would be caught soon enough, and if it did catch him, oh God, it was too terrible to think of. And as that certainty of abandoned hope settled in his breast, something reached out to Jack in the darkness. A hand. The softest and most gentle hand took hold of his and began to lead him through the darkness. Once more he was overcome by a strong floral smell. The sound of the demon receded behind him, and before he knew it, Jack was back at the door through which he'd entered the dreadful corridor. As I emerged into the light, Jack said, I saw the stranger who had guided me to my salvation. I'm sure I saw an angel, clad all in white and radiating a heavenly glow. It leaned in close to my ear and whispered, "Run." And run he did. Jack ran to the Turk's Head, the nearest place he thought he might find comfort, perhaps to share his unsettling tale with anyone who would listen. And now, Jack went on, I must find Reverend Small. The whole place must be blessed before Isabel and I are to be wed. The Reverend will know what to do. At this decisive statement, Havelock the drunk coughed and spluttered. He moved as if to stand, but only leaned closer to our table. The new Reverend is a damn fool, he spat. There should never be another wedding at that place, not if folk know what's good for them. Quieten down, I said. Can't you see the boy's had a scare? A near miss is what he's had. How short this foolish city's memory is. Listen to me, boy, and listen well. Cancel your wedding at that damned place. There's an evil which lurks there, and tonight you disturbed it. Your marriage will be cursed indeed if you proceed. Don't think upon a fleeting, frivolous day. Think instead of your salvation. Think of your very souls. This time it was I who stood up from my seat, determined to show Havelock the door. But Jack said, No. Let him speak, my friend. Tell us what you know, Mr. Havelock. And so, Havelock spoke. When I was a child, I was an altar boy at St. John's, and I witnessed a most tragic union there. Now, many years before that most fateful wedding, on a storm-choked October night, a young woman arrived on the doorstep of St. John's seeking refuge. What a state she was in. The priest offered her shelter and protection. He bade the verger bring her dry clothes and broth. Her name was Elizabeth. She was the daughter of an ironmonger notorious in the city. She told the priest and the verger of her treatment at her father's hands. He was a most cruel and violent man, half blind from all the booze he'd swallowed, a colossal brute whose very soul boiled with hate. He was a fright to behold, to boot. His mouth and gums were stained brown by chewing tobacco, and his habit had ground his teeth down to stumps. Oh, and how he mistreated that poor wretch. She was henceforth entrusted to the care of the verger, a man in his 20s. He nursed her day and night, and as often as he was able, the young man brought Elizabeth a posy of roses, the girl's most beloved bloom. The two quickly became the best of friends, and then soon enough they began to fall hopelessly for one another. Only happiness seemed to be ahead for them, though nightmares of the woman's past continued to haunt her. She would wake in the night, screaming about her treatment in what she called the Red Room. At this, the colour drained from Jack's face. Red Room. I too was put in mind of the terrible corridor of his story, and my mind raced to the detail of the implements that had been strewn about its floor. Then he rode. After some time the verger could contain his love no longer. He proposed marriage to Elizabeth. She joyfully agreed, and the union received the blessing of the priest. The couple adored each other. They were equals. The finest pairing, two people who truly deserve the kindness and love of the other. Soon, though, the ironmonger learned of his daughter's whereabouts and of her intentions to marry. On several occasions he tried to pay a visit to his long-suffering child. Each time, though, the wicked man's attempts were thwarted. But on one morning, a note was found nailed to the door of the church. It read in a scratchy hand, "I will be with you on the day." Fearing the scale of disturbance her father might bring about, and with a stone of sadness in her heart, Elizabeth called off the wedding indefinitely. Years passed, and the two lovers watched each other fondly, sadly at a distance, patiently awaiting the day when they might be united. Their love did not dwindle even a jot. Time itself, though, seemed to slow. They wondered if their day would ever come. Finally, the old brute died. His wretched heart failed him, and he fell like a slab of sheet-rock to the ground in his iron yard. Not a soul mourned him, and he was thrown into a pauper's grave on unconsecrated ground. But now, of course, a date could be set. The two could be married. The priest swore that this would be the most splendid day that Yorkshire had ever seen. On the morning of her wedding, the bride, though flying in the face of all tradition, got up, readied herself in a gown, and came directly to the church, hours before even the first guest had arrived. She wanted a moment alone with the priest to thank him for his kindness and shelter over the years. When she walked into that church, she would have found herself faced with a sea of roses. For the entire place had been decked in the flowers, especially for her. Just shy of an hour later, when the Reverend arrived at the church, found that poor woman slumped on the ground, lying lifeless, and the priest swore that he saw some huge shadowy figure leaning over her body, which seemed to vanish like smoke as the priest approached the altar. In Elizabeth's dead hand was a note which read, "I will be with you on the day." After that day, Havelock told us, strange, fatal accidents befell many of those betrothed to be married at St. John's, and so, in fear, the weddings stopped, and other nearby parishes were favoured. A curious look passed over Jack's face. "Many, Mr. Havelock." We both looked at him. "You said that terrible fate befell many of those who were to be married at St. John's. Then not all." A strange steadiness was suddenly evident in the young man. He stood, put on his hat, and gave thanks to me and to Havelock. He turned on his heel and walked out of the inn. I made to follow, intrigued by this calm which had descended upon him. "Let him go," said Havelock. After Jack's exit, Havelock and I passed a while in silence. Then, entirely unable to resist the call of curiosity, and despite my dislike for the fellow, I asked him, "And what of the young verger? The groom in your story, what became of him?" "Ah," croaked Havelock, "well, therein lies its own tragedy. You see, the groom, quite a storyteller he was. He was travelling from Halifax the morning of the wedding, where his best man had thrown him a most unholy and delightful so-called stag party the night before. The two set off early in a trap pulled by 2 horses. That best man was a rogue, but one whose heart was nothing but good. Near penniless, his gift to the groom was that he would play at the wedding breakfast. It's said that he was the finest fiddle player in the West Riding. You can stop now. We can all hear you. I know the end of this story by heart. I feel like I've been telling it for a long time. The cart never made its destination. Somewhere along the road, the horses were startled and the trap tipped onto its side, dragged along for a mile at least. The 2 men did not survive. The best man and the groom were laid to rest here in St. John's Church. But they do not rest. Just one more thing. If you were to check the Church of St. John's records, you'd see that about the time of Arthur Clayton's account, a young couple named Jack and Isabel Waterhouse were married here. The census of the time tells us that they lived a long and happy life together. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you all so much for coming. Thanks. Cheers. I got through it without too many problems. Thank you. I hope the sound was all right and everything. That was fun. I'm now in a weird position where, do I leave the setup as it is or do I turn my light on? I think I'm going to leave it because it's atmospheric, right? So if you have any questions or anything, now's the time. Oh, there are 26 of you watching. Hello. I'm waving at the wrong camera. Hello. It's a weird thing. I've got this remote camera, but I keep looking up there. Because that's where the lens usually is. So I shall try my best to. I might just move this a little bit. There we go. Okay. So if you have any questions or anything like that, please fire away, my friends. Fire away. I'm so. I feel so weird sitting in this light. But does it look weird? What happens if I do this? Is that better? No. Let's turn it off. Hello from Canada. Hi, Darren. Hi, how you doing? Welcome to my Patreon as well, Darren. I think you're quite new to here. Kimberly says it's an origin story. Yeah, well, actually, interesting. Or interesting to me anyway. This is the first story we ever did, and we had no idea. So this is the Book of Darkness and Light for anybody who hasn't seen it before. But now that you've seen it, I mean, I really cannot guarantee your safety. Sorry, should have told you that as a warning, but there we go. So yeah, we wrote this. I wrote it and got in touch with Ben. By the way, Ben, I asked him if he would do a Q&A with me this evening, and he really, really, really wanted to. But he's travelling in. He lives in Spain now, so he was travelling from one place to another, and it was kind of, he needed to do it, so it's a damn shame, but he's not able to join us this evening. Anyway, so I wrote this story, and Light Night was a festival in Leeds, an arts festival, and I applied, and I got a very, very small amount of money, but not nothing, but a small amount to create something like this. And I met Ben through a friend of mine, and we sat down this one day in Ben's flat, and I said, I've got this idea, I've got a bit of money, it's not much, but what do you think? And he was like, yeah, it sounds good. I went to his flat, we sat down, I started reading the story, and he started playing his violin. And the second that he did that, it was, for me, history was made, because it was really moving and magical, and I thought, we have something here, it works. It's a really simple concept, and I'm sure people have done it before. One voice, one violin, and for us it just worked. And I was just so over the moon. And we did it, and I performed it live, and we did it 5 times over one evening. Now, something to keep in mind is that I never ever in my life acted before. Before that, I'd done a little bit of stand-up comedy, and I'd done some poetry readings and stuff like that at university, but I never ever acted. And it was bewildering, but people liked it, and people said nice things. In fact, I was under the impression that somebody who was at the original reading might be here tonight. So if you are, I think you probably know who you are. Please make yourself known. I'm just going to have a look at the comments on Patreon in case any comments have been left on there. So let's just see. Good. Amy Hedgecoker said she can finally make it. Can't wait. Hi, Amy. I hope you are here. So people liked it, and over the evening, now how many people? 1,600 people, I believe, came to that first reading that we ever did, it was we had a fun time, and we got some feedback at the end, and again, people were dead kind and dead nice about it. But in terms of the origin story, there was some stuff that I'd taken out of this, because even with the Book of Darkness and Light, there's canon, right? So the stuff that we accept it's crazy, but within our company we accept, this is the true story of the book, and we know more about it than we share, obviously. And Ben and I said on that first night, there's that line where I say, how the book came to be in my possession is a story for another night. And Ben and I said, the last gig we ever do together, we'll reveal what that story is. That'll be the story. But this was at a time when we thought that we were going to just do single stories in this very kind of modest setting, and to go to Upon the Stair, which we toured briefly in February, which was in this huge, beautiful theatre in Harrogate, this gorgeous, massive house, and it was a play, and it had huge set. And we had Rafi Julian, who was another actor with us, and the whole thing, her whole performance was in BSL, so it was accessible for deaf audiences as well as hearing audiences. And we had this huge honking soundtrack done by Guy Connolly, and lighting design by Tim Skelly, and all the other people that were involved. It was incredible, and to go from that first night where we had literally the only thing we had was little candles, and I mean like plastic ones that are battery operated, down the aisle, and it was light. It wasn't lit in any particular way. There's no stage lighting. It was just as it was. But I'll tell you in a moment. In fact, I'll tell you now. We also met this guy called John at the church, and you see, St John's Church is not used regularly as a for church services. It's not used every week. It's closed most of the time because I'm looking at that camera as well. It's closed most of the time, and it's open on bank holidays and special occasions. And if you ever get a chance to go, it's beautiful. You should go. And we met a few people there. We met John, and this guy John plays the organ when it is required at the church. And we said, John, would you accompany us at certain points in the story? And he was really up for it, but we couldn't quite carve out enough rehearsal time. So basically we asked John to just do one note, and it's at a point in this version of the story, I didn't really push it, but it's where Jack sees the figure in the aisle, and I went there, and I shouted, and I pointed to the audience, and then John blasted on the organ, and it was so fun to see people jump when that happened. But John could only do, I think it was 3 of the 5 performances, and I remember having a conversation with Ben where I said, look, the issue is that he needs to get back home, which I think he lived in Huddersfield or something, so why don't I'll just pay his taxi fare or something, it'll be fine. Anyway, at the end of the 3rd performance, I think it was, I just heard this voice behind me go, anyway, see you later. And I turned, and John was off. He was gone. So we had to do the last 2 without the organ, which was perfectly fine, but it was just incredible. I'll never forget that blast of the organ the first time I heard it. Anyway, so Jill says, like, know how you develop that tale. I hope that kind of covers it. And then the only other time I remembered this the other day, there was somebody in the audience called Paul Cooper, and Paul is this incredible theatre producer. He does all sorts of stuff. He's been so good to us as a company, and he's really into horror, and he was there that night, and he said, we're doing an event at Lawrence Batley Theatre in Huddersfield next week, which was it was Halloween. He says on Halloween night, and it'll be in this really cool space. Do you want to do it? And I was like, yeah, let's do it. So we did that, and again, it was like 2 or 3 performances, and it was all sold out. Again, it was this Halloween happening, I think they call it, and that was really cool. Slightly different group of people, because on the front row of the very first gig we did, everyone more or less was wearing a mask, and it was the same mask. It was a Scream mask, and I didn't know if it was like a stag do or something, but it was so difficult because you had no idea if they were enjoying it or paying attention or any of that stuff. So it was really fun. And then I remember in that gig, or one of those gigs that night, somebody a really scary moment, or a really tense moment, not a particularly scary moment, tapped somebody else on the shoulder. I don't know if they knew them or not, and that person screamed and leapt up in the air. And I don't know how, with no experience of working on stage at all, but I don't know, I held it together, and I have no idea how I held it together, because frankly it was hilarious and terrifying. And let's have a look what else we got. Chris asked, was that the original score you used? No, it wasn't, Chris. That score was was the original. This is where it gets a bit complicated, because that story you heard was called The Book of Darkness and Light, right? We gave it another name, but I don't like it, so I never use it. It's just a rubbish name. There's nothing mystical about it. I think it was The Crimson Corridor. Don't like it. Awful title. So anyway, that was called The Book of Darkness and Light. But the score that you heard tonight was the score for The Book of Darkness and Light, but not that story. It's the 3-story show that we took out on tour as a result of having done this. And that this story didn't fit with that at all. So what you heard was the score for that. Now, I'd love to know in the comments whether it worked. Whether it fit with what I was doing, because I just didn't have time to, allocate the music specifically to each scene. So I literally just let the thing play, and I'm aware that some of the things might not have, married very well with exactly what was going on in the text. So let me know how it sounded, whether you felt it was a bit weird. Just out of curiosity, really. I don't think I'll do this again. So this story again. But that may be the last ever time I do that story, maybe, because a couple of things. Firstly, I don't think it's. It was so special to do that story. It was so special, and it was so specific to that venue and that night, that I don't think it really works outside of the context of explaining exactly where it was. Now, explaining where we are in that, we're in St John's Church in Leeds. Now, funnily enough, the venue that we did the week after, the couple of weeks after, which was on Halloween in Huddersfield, used to be a church or something. I'm sure it used to be a church, and so we were able to just change it up a little bit, and basically we did it there. But that was our first experience of using stage lighting or anything. It was really weird. Yeah. Anyway, thank you for your lovely comments. Was it before or after Blink on Doctor Who? I don't know, Jackie. I'm not sure when that came out. I would say this might have been after that. I don't know. Why did it remind you of? Did it remind you of that? Let me know. I'd be interested to know. Thank you, Sarah, for your lovely comment. Danny says came in late due to work. Oh, okay. Okay. Rewind it, Danny. Watch the whole thing. It'll stay all 9. Chris says it fit very well. You seem to phrase the tale well around the pauses in playing. But here's the thing, Chris. I can't hear it. Sorry, I didn't explain that properly. I literally just press play on the scene on this bit of software that I've got, and the music plays underneath, and I can see that it's playing, but I can't hear it. So if I manage to stop at the right point, it's complete fluke. Honestly, I'm gonna watch it back at some point and see. Yeah. Angela asked. It was Angela asking, and yes, it was the statues. Yeah. I remember the episode. Yeah. Oh, I'm glad that it reminded. I never ever had that comparison with this story. So that's it really. I'll tell you one more quick thing about how we developed into the company. But if you have any other questions, chuck them in the comments, and I'll gladly answer. So what happened after this was, as I say, we had 1,600 people come through the doors. We had some lovely comments. It was so clear to us that people were enjoying it, and I was very aware of my performance, because it was the first thing I'd ever really done. I was reading it. It felt kind of stilted. I was nervous, but people nevertheless enjoyed it. So I thought to myself, well, cheers. I thought to myself, cheers. Now I thought to myself, if they enjoyed that, if I were to write some stories specifically for this format, more stories for this format, and make them really scary and work on my performance, blah, 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 then maybe there's something in this. And Ben and I said, look, let's do it. Let's do it again. Let's keep doing it for as long as people want us to do it. That was kind of the decision we came to. And I wrote 2... How did it work? There were 2 gigs that we did at a place called Hyde Park Book Club, which is this beautiful, cosy little venue. I think it's massive now. I think it's expanded. But when we played it, it was tiny. and we played 2 gigs there. With different stories, and one was with the Bone House, which some of you will know, which ended up in the first show that we toured. And what was the other one? I can't remember. Maybe it was the Rug in the Smaller Drawing Room, which was an earlier story. Oh, and also a story called Uncle Henry, which I've been promising will be coming, and it will be coming to Patreon. I think I might do it as a live stream on Facebook at some point as an audio thing, but you guys will get it on Patreon first as the audio. And it was this sweaty little room. It was windows, little bar, and it was Christmas time, the first one. Yeah, it was Christmas time, and there was mulled wine on the go, and it was incredible. It was so lovely. And they sold out. I think we did 2 per gig, and they sold out. It was only small, but we were delighted that they sold out. And then I was really interested in doing this as a proper theatre show, so I spoke to the producer that I've been working with, Dick Bonham, on other projects, and I said, I want to write this as a stage show, and I want there to be 3 stories, and it'll be me and Ben, and that'll kind of be it. Some sound effects maybe, but mainly it'll just be, it'll just be very lo-fi. I can't remember. There was a delay. There was a reason why it was kind of going to be delayed. I think the point was, if we were going to do it, we'd have to wait until the following year because venues would be booked up or something like that. I can't remember. So I started ringing libraries, and I spoke to this one woman called Christine at Knaresborough Library, and basically the conversation with Christine at Knaresborough Library led to us booking a tour of about 10 libraries on that one phone call, and she kept ringing me back and saying, would you do another couple? And so we laid it out. We laid out this tour of libraries that we were going to take these 3 stories to, me and Ben. And at the same time, we then put in a bid to the Arts Council, a fundraising application, and long story short, we got that, and we were able to buy some equipment to tour with, some really bad LED lighting, which in a library though looked incredible because it made it look like a theatre space. We bought a sound equipment, PA and stuff, and a mixing desk and all this sort of stuff that you need. Very, very cheap stuff, in all honesty, because it was a perfectly decent amount of money, but it was a small pot of money in the scheme of things. And we toured to about 10 libraries, and then we toured to Castle Carey, where the Bone House takes its inspiration, and we toured to Harrogate Theatre, and we also did a venue called Streets in the Sky in Halifax, which was affiliated with Square Chapel. And then the following year we did a theatre tour of the same show, whilst at the same time debuting Shivers that same autumn. It was crazy. We'd written Shivers in the interim. Then Shivers went on to a 33 theatre tour. And then, Christmas Carol and Upon the Stair. So it's been a wild 5 years. And I want to say a massive thank you to you for continuing to support me. And if you knew us before the lockdown, I hope you were able to see some of the shows. And if you didn't know us before the lockdown, I say us, I'm the company really, but there's loads of people involved now, actors, and Chloe Hayward is our new violin player. Ben had to leave because he got a job in a different area of work, and Chloe's our violin player, and she's amazing. But it's one big family, and thank you so much for your support, for helping me keep doing this stuff through lockdown. It's been an incredible 5 years, I could not be more grateful for it, and everyone involved has worked so hard to bring these plays to the stage, and yeah, it's wild, and I'm so proud of Upon the Stair, and I'm so sad that we're not touring it this autumn. It's really, really sad because it's an incredible thing. I'm not talking about my bits, which I can't judge and would say are fair to middling, but the production is amazing. I think I'm so proud of it. It's such a spectacle as well. So I hope that doesn't sound too vain or conceited, but I guess I'm always, my brain is always on that night in Leeds 5 years ago where we're in this church with no bells and whistles whatsoever, and now we're doing these stage shows with, you know, with a huge team of people. It's just kind of wild. So thank you, thanks so much. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there. It's been a pleasure. Happy 5th birthday to the Book of Darkness and Light. Don't forget, come and join me on Halloween. If you don't know what I'm talking about, have a look through the posts on Patreon. But on Halloween, I'm doing a writing workshop, kind of Halloween horror writing workshop, which is going to be really fun. It's like a 2.5 hour one. It's a bit of a beast. It's going to be great. And then the evening, I'm doing a reading of a brand new story that nobody has ever heard of. Nobody has ever heard. Nobody's ever heard of. You've heard of it because I just told you. Nobody's ever heard. Called A Bowl of Walnuts, which is a slightly weird, kind of grisly and gruesome story. I was reading it yesterday and it's a bit grim. It's a bit grisly. I'm going to have to do a bit of a warning, I think, at the start. So, yeah, but come to that, please. And as a member of my Patreon, you get a discount. So again, scroll through the posts, and depending on what level you're able to support me at, you get a discount at that level, basically. So that's it. Thank you for your lovely, lovely, lovely messages. I am going to wind it up now. Hope you've enjoyed it. I really, really hope you've enjoyed it. Thanks for sticking with me to the end. And yeah, thanks a lot. It really means a lot to me that you support me. So thank you ever so much. I'm now trying to smoothly find the slide that I need to go to, but I'm not managing it very smoothly at all, am I? So here we go. All right. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. Take care, and I'll see you on Halloween, but I'll be in touch with you obviously before that. Take care. Thank you so much. Bye bye.